Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we explore the horrors of kidnapping. I'm sure there are many situations where you feel genuine horror, but the fear that you feel when you know that you've been taken, and that your fate, however dark it may be, now lies with strangers with ill intentions, is something that unsettles even the strongest of stomachs. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This happened to me last night, and I am still currently freaking out. My roommate had gone up to the foothills to spend Christmas with his family, and was there for about 3 days. On the 27th around midnight, he asked if I could come get him, because he didn't want to stay there another night. I didn't mind. We'd been best friends for 4 years, so I'm used to driving him to the city. Now for a little backstory. I live in a very small rural area, and there are only 2 ways to get from our town to the next city, both of which take about an hour and a half round trip. One road is the main highway, but doesn't lead to the foothills, so it would take me 2 hours to reach him that way. The other road is a back road that leads straight to the foothills, so naturally I took that road. Now this road is surrounded by nothing but desert for about 20 miles, with the occasional housing developments, so it's very dark at the time of night. It's also very secluded and less taken. The only reason you take it is to go to the foothills, the college, or leave the country. There are about 4 cars total going that way, and I'm driving, and they all pass me within minutes. The speed limit is about 65, and I'm going 55. About 15 minutes into the drive, I see a car coming up behind me, so I pay it no mind because I figure it will just overtake me like the rest do. It comes up right behind me, and is right up on my back. I'm more confused than I am scared, because why is this person right behind me? I'm only doing 55 in the slow lane, and I don't go faster, and I don't move, which I guess egged them on, because they kept turning their brights on and off, and started swerving behind me. Now I'm thoroughly freaked out, and hoping they'll either leave me alone, or another car will drive by. Neither of those happen. They do this all the way to the foothills, and I think, okay, so they're either going to keep following me or turn somewhere. They keep following me. I'm nearing the exit where my friend is, so I'm afraid that they are going to see where my friend's family lives and hurt them. So I call my friend and tell him to meet me at the convenience store, because I wanted to get something to drink, not telling him that someone was following me. I get to the store and watch the car pass by the store, and finally calm down, thinking it was just some arsehole messing with me. I met up with my friend, and we get some drinks and a snack to leave. For about half an hour it's fine, and we're just talking about what we did during the holidays, joking around and the like. I had completely forgotten about the car, until it started happening again. Now, the reason I didn't tell my roommate to begin with is because he kind of has a temper, so instead of being scared, he's pissed. Not only at the car, but at me for not telling him before. He's screaming for me to stop, so that he can deal with this arsehole, and I am refusing out of fear. The thing is, my roommate is a 5'10" bodybuilder, so he's quite intimidating, while I, on the other hand, am 5'6" and disabled, with the only thing going for me is that I carry a hatchet everywhere. So he's used to scaring people off. I tell him no, that we're going to the police station in our town, and he calms down for a bit. As we get to the station, the car disappears again, and we sit there for about 15 minutes seeing if he circles back. Now in hindsight, what we did was kind of stupid, because we didn't go into the station and ask for help. We just went home without thinking they might have been waiting for us to leave. We were constantly looking behind our shoulders while we were driving to make sure that no one was following us, and when we got home, we thought they were gone. Now this is the part that scared the hell out of me. We had been home for hours, and my roommate was already passed out in his room, and I was the only one awake. It was about 4 in the morning, and I had gone to the restroom, which was right across from the hall from my room. From the way our house is set up, is that the kitchen and living room are separated by a wall, with a 4-foot wide space as an entrance, and the living room is connected to a 10-foot long narrow hallway. Now, from the living room, you can't see most of the kitchen, or past 2 feet in the hallway, and from the hallway, you can't see half of the living room when by the bathroom. I get down in the restroom and see lights flashing through the living room window. I'm in the hallway, too afraid to move and get my phone out or wake my roommate, but my bedroom door is open, so I softly call for my dog, who is a miniature husky, knowing he barks at anything that moves, hoping that will scare them away. As I thought, once he sees the lights he goes berserk, and he's short so he can't reach the window, but he's in the middle of the coffee table barking. I see the lights turn off, and wait about 5 minutes before he starts barking in the kitchen. My roommate is now awake, asking me what the hell the dog is barking at, and I tell him, and he goes back to his room to get his boxer on her leash, and tells me to get my hatchet and my phone. As I'm getting my stuff, I hear a thud against the back door, and then another. They're trying to kick in the door, and I call 911 and explain the situation. Then they said they'll be there in 10. I go back to my roommate, and we head to the kitchen, where he opens the back door, and in stumble 2 guys about my height dressed in all black. They look at us and start freaking out, because they've got 2 guys with fairly large dogs. One who looks like he injects steroids, and the other one with a hatchet. One guy is screaming, "This isn't our house, how did you mess this up?" And the other one is bawling his eyes out. Apparently, they were going to break into one of the guy's ex-girlfriend's house, who happened to be my next door neighbor, and kidnap her. The one guy got the house wrong, and mistook me for the guy's ex because I had my hood up, and they couldn't see my face, and I have the same build as her. The cops arrived shortly afterwards and took them away. It was freaky, and I hope it never happens again, because I don't know what I would have done if they really were after us. I recently drove from Philadelphia to Buffalo with my cat. The ride was long, but we were making decent time for the most part. She and I had gotten up towards right before you got into New York. It was around 5:30 p.m. But that also meant it was pitch black outside too. We'd only stopped once to get something at McDonald's, and I drank their iced tea quickly to try and stay awake. I definitely had to pee. I didn't want to leave my cat in the car, so I put her leash on and we walked into the gas station. I said, "Do you mind if we use the restroom here?" The man behind the counter said sure, and she and I entered the bathroom. She sat on the counter while I did my thing. The store wasn't empty. There were some dudes around browsing for honey buns, tasty cake, and cheaper cigarettes than those in New York. There was a woman talking to the counter guy up front. She was probably a regular based on their interaction and familiarity. My cat jumped about a foot when we heard the doorknob rattle. I laughed and said, "Sorry, it's occupied." My cat is a trained animal, and she is trained to handle people. Stimulating situations, crowds, and relatively loud noises. But she does hate cars. I looked over at her after the jump, and her tail was as full as could be, and she got low and slipped up to her favorite position on my shoulders. She dug into my hair with her nails and did her little grumble at me that she does when she wants to be let outside. The doorknob rattled again, and she reached out towards the door, like in a quick way to strike. "It's still occupied," I called out, but I wasn't laughing this time. We then heard someone speak. It was a man's voice, and honestly, it kind of made my blood run cold. They were speaking my native language, Polish. They were saying, "Should I grab her when she comes out?" And in my native tongue, grab doesn't really have multiple connotations like it does in English. Like, let me grab them before they go, I have to ask them something, or grab a bite to eat, grabbed by the hair and stuff. They used it as in to take, as in to kidnap, as far as I could tell. "No, the cashier's right there," the other one said. "We can go stand outside. I think a car is the blue one." My cat did the angry grumble bug sound, and I tried to pet and reassure her. There weren't any windows in this bathroom, and my car was parked, unwisely, around the side of the lot. I parked it a little away from the lights, because I had a lot of stuff in it, and didn't want items to be lit. It was not the blue one. We heard their steps retreat, and we sat there for what felt like quite a long time. We both jumped when we heard a knock at the door. "Come out quickly, and my girlfriend will lead you through back to your car. They're standing out by the pumps." It was the counter guy, and who I thought was the regular. I opened the door, and she ushered me to the back. Not smart, but I didn't really have anything else I could do. She opened the door, and I could see my car about 20 feet away. I wanted to sprint, but I remembered I used my key thing to set the alarm. I unlocked the car with my keys, and the alarm went off, and I have deep cuts from where my cat jumped in the air. I threw myself into the driver's seat, unlocked it with the key thing, and quickly pressed the button to lock it again. I felt my heart in my throat as I threw the car into reverse and got the hell out of there. On my way, I noticed the guy standing near the blue car on the other side of the lot, trying to nonchalantly smoke. They didn't even know that I got out. When I was 15, I went on a school trip to a neighboring country. We were staying in a quite nice hotel with a 7-Eleven less than half a mile away. My school was pretty loose, so the teachers allowed us to walk to the 7-Eleven whenever we wanted, just as long as we had another person with us. One night, at about 9 p.m, my friend and I, both girls, decide to go grab some food. As we were walking there, a gold car, very recognizable, slowed down next to us. The windows rolled down to reveal 4 men, all in about their mid-20s in army uniform. They started catcalling and wolf whistling, and making us feel uncomfortable in general. We scoffed and kept walking, hoping that they would leave us alone. Eventually they drove off, but about 30 seconds later they drove past us again. clearly having made a U-turn at the end of the road. This time, their calls were a lot more creepy, saying that we were their types and that it was going to be a fun night. My friend and I were only half a block from the 7-Eleven, so we ran inside, looking understandably panicked. We started browsing the store, but were too freaked out to buy anything. We were just about to leave when we noticed headlights passing the store windows. We turned to the front door and saw the gold car slowly doing circles around the car park. My friend and I really started freaking out, at which point the clerk in the store noticed, and he asked us if we were okay, and we explained the situation to him. He said he'd handle it and went outside. We saw him leaning to the gold car and making hand motions as if telling them to go away. The gold car then drove off, and we breathed a sigh of relief. We thanked the clerk and bought some food. Just as we were about to leave again, the clerk made a weird face at the door. "Hang on a second," he said. The clerk walked out of the store far enough to just see around the corner. He said and asked in a very calm voice to follow him to the back of the store. "Girls, I don't want to frighten you, but the car is parked just around the corner, and only the driver is in it." My friend and I asked what we should do, if we should call the police or something, but the clerk said that because they were wearing a military uniform, it was unlikely that the police would be on our side. He said several girls in the city had gone missing in similar circumstances, and nothing had ever been done. The clerk told us his car was parked around the back of the shop, and if we were quick, we would get in and drive off without being seen by the golden car. Immediately, I was skeptical about getting into a car with a stranger, but it felt like it was our only shot. We ran and jumped into the car. Thankfully, the clerk dropped us off safely at our hotel. We told the teacher what happened, and after that, a rule was created that if you left the hotel, it was in groups of 3 with at least one boy. We went back a few times afterwards and thanked the clerk again, but only during the day. On summer days, my best friend and I would venture around our woodsy neighborhood and do typical kid things. I had a little sister who was around 7 or 8 at the time, and she also had a little sister the same age. My friend was called Sarah, my little sister Sammy, and her little sister Alex. We would occasionally let them tag along on our adventure, especially if our parents made us. Our favourite thing to do was to walk to our other neighbour's house, the Smiths, and use their trampoline. It was in our neighbourhood, but the houses are pretty spread, with dense forest in between. We'd set off towards their place, and it was about a 20 to 30-minute walk, longer on the way back because we had to go uphill. One day, Sarah and I decided to let Sammy and Alex come with us and go on the trampoline at the same time, as they weren't really allowed very far from our houses without an adult or us with them. We played on it for about an hour and decided that we were thirsty, and we decided to go back to Sarah and Alex's house in search of drinks and snacks. We were almost back to their house, but the last stretch before their house was the longest amount of isolated road with a creek flowing by, and no houses lining the road, just dense forest. As soon as we cleared this area, we would be right on top of their house. As we were almost through the wooded part, and we can see their house up ahead. A woman with short black hair and sunglasses is walking past with a baby in a stroller. She was walking towards us and would soon pass. I didn't recognize her as someone who lived in our neighborhood, and I know everyone. But lots of people from surrounding neighborhoods take walks here because of the woods. She passes us normally, but right after she does, she says, "Oh hey, kids, I'm a little lost. What road is this?" None of us were very alarmed. The neighborhood is windy and can be confusing, and plus, she was a lady with a baby, not some creepy dude, so we felt mostly at ease. We told her the name of the road, and she told us that she was really lost and needed to get home in order to take care of her baby. She then asked if we could escort her to her house, because she didn't think she'd be able to find it, even with directions. Sarah agreed to help, but I felt really uncomfortable and was told never to talk to strangers, even if they're women. I told the lady none of us could help because Sarah's dad was expecting us home soon. Sarah gave me a weird look, but I think she caught on because she said, "Oh yeah, we can't actually help. Sorry." At this point, I wasn't really freaked out. I just knew I shouldn't be helping strangers to their houses. I went to step in front of the younger two, as they were trailing behind us, and I wanted to push them forward so that we could start walking away. I stepped closer to the lady in my efforts, and could then see into her stroller, and that's when my heart sank. The baby was fake. It was a baby doll, and was all wrapped in blankets, but I could see very clearly that it was plastic. At that point I didn't know what to do, and I found myself screaming to run. I made sure that Sammy and Alex were ahead of me, and I sprinted for their house. Her dad was working in the garage on something, and we ran in out of breath and crying. I quickly just said that there was a lady trying to get us to go home with her who had a fake baby, and he grabbed a golf club from his caddy that was lying out and about and told us to get inside. We all went in, and a few minutes later he came back. He said he was heading towards the lady when she spotted him. She was already on the phone with someone. Out of nowhere, a white van appeared, screeched up, and she threw in the stroller and they sped off. It was definitely a creepy experience, and I'm pretty sure that the lady's intentions were not remotely innocent. This truly scared the shit out of us. We didn't wander around the neighborhood nearly as much, and when we did, we were always looking out for something. I have always been more active at night, usually out for walks, runs, or even just hanging out at the park. I was 17 at the time of this incident, and knew this area like the back of my hand. I'm not usually scared of being out alone, and I lived in a really good neighborhood, and always made note of safe places to go if I needed help. I was out for a run around 9 p.m. It was a beautiful night, and I decided not to take my phone with me. During my run, I crossed through a field besides an indoor pool / library, which is a very well-lit area. I had planned to go across the lot, turn right, and head down by the river for the last stretch back home. I'm always checking my surroundings with my head on a swivel, and I noticed a man to my left. Taking out my earbuds, I slowed my jog and approached him, keeping about 2 arms' length between us. I asked him if he was lost, and he let me know that he was looking for the soccer center I gave him very, very clear instructions, and he repeated them back to me. He thanked me, and hesitantly went on his way. My jogging route was back on the same path, so I was able to watch to see if he was able to reach his destination. However, I kept that information to myself. As I jogged, I noticed a second person in the parking lot. He was looking at his phone, but all other vehicles were empty and turned off, but his was running. At the time, I thought nothing of it and continued on. I rounded the corner, and the guy I spoke with had got stuck at a light, but he turned beside me shortly after and then stopped about 5 cars lengths ahead of me and parked. He got out of his vehicle, which he turned off, and came to ask me more instructions. I kept my distance as best I could, and again instructed him to go up half a block and turn another right. Then he started tapping his pockets and told me he locked himself out of the vehicle. He checked the 2 doors on the driver's side, and then, since I was on the sidewalk, asked me to try the others. I did, and they were locked. He then came around besides me and checked the rear passenger doors again, despite me trying it already. I backed away and told him I would be right back, that I was going around the corner, as it was the end of the block, within eyesight and a bit to the left. And I was doing this in order to call a tow truck from the gas station. He, for some reason, tried to get me to stay while trying the doors. I ran to the gas station. No one would let me use the phone, which was a policy for customers, and no one had got a coat hanger, so I casually walked back. It was then that I saw, from a distance, the second guy in his vehicle parked 5-ish cars lengths behind the first guy, and I watched the first guy get back into his vehicle, and they both drove off very quickly behind each other in the same direction. It was at that moment that I realized he was never locked out. He never needed directions, and this was all a ploy to kidnap some woman. I spun on my heels and walked back home on the busiest streets. No shortcuts, no back alleys, and no parking lots. I will never leave home without my phone again. And I'm so happy I kept my distance while interacting with him. Who knows what would have happened if I'd have been just that bit closer. It was the second day into a 4-day stay after having my son. 24 hours of labour, and was the night after I finally delivered him. My now ex-husband and I decided to go downstairs and sit outside of the hospital benches just to get some air. My son went to sleep, and I made sure that he was secure in the nursery with attending nurses and headed off around 11:30 at night. We were sitting outside while my ex smoked a cigarette and a woman approached us. Her husband was in the car, and I noticed one child in the car sitting in the back seat sleeping. We were right by the ER entrance, so I didn't think anything of it. Maybe she knew someone in the ER and was just coming out to keep her husband up to speed. The hospital has a different coloured band for the maternity ward, corresponding with the band your child has on, as well as some kind of let's not switch babies precaution. The woman approached us and noticed my band, and asks if I had a baby. I told her I had, and she asked if it was a boy or girl, to which I reply. And then she starts getting into a story of her multiple miscarriages and infertility. This is when I start noticing she looks like she's tweaking. She's jittery, wide-eyed and looking around, picking at her skin. And her husband has the dome light on in the car, staring at us the whole time. She then starts asking me if he sleeps with me or in the nursery, and how I delivered him, and how old he was. Avoiding her questions and getting seriously freaked out, I look into the car again and notice an empty infant's car seat next to her other child's. I immediately shut down the conversation, tell my ex-husband I'm starting to feel pain again, as it was a C-section so it was believable, and hightail my sore ass the hell out of there. I get back upstairs to the maternity ward and alert the charge nurse. She immediately locks down the ward for the night and calls the cops. Come to find out, there had been a missing child case in one of the neighbouring counties that matched the child's description of the one in the car, and a few hospitals in the area had been getting calls about them over the course of the last week. I spoke to the cops, gave them a description of everyone and the car seats, as they stood out as they were a really cute pattern, and they thanked me profusely. About a month ago, there was this strange black van. Vans aren't that unusual, since they don't use trucks, but this one had tinted windows. It started to follow me around whenever I left the house, which is very rare, since I'm naturally a lazy person, and I noticed it after 4 days. It would wait outside of a store if I was in it, and would follow me home. 2 weeks ago, when I went on a 2-hour car ride to a campground to swim, it was there, sitting in the parking lot, not even 2 meters when I noticed it. I told my older sister to watch the van and to tell me if anything unusual happened to it. When we left about 4 to 5 hours later, it started to follow us on the ride home. My sister said no one stepped out of the car and that it was following us. I told her that I knew, and she looked at me like I was crazy, and then told her that it had been following me for the past 3 weeks. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I tell my parents? Well, I'm in a whole nother country, with only my grandma who speaks a different language and my older sister. Both of my parents are literally on the other side of the world. It gets even weirder. Just last week when I went on my bike with my sister to go shopping, the van followed us. When we were at a crossing of a busy road, if you were close enough, and not too close off the road, you could see a flashing of a light, like a flashlight turning on and off. And after a few minutes, I noticed that not only was it coming from the van, but it looked like it was a camera taking pictures with flash. After we walked to the store, I told my sister what had happened at the crossing, and she looked very frightened, and we left shortly after. We hurried onto our bikes and onto a bike-only trail, and even though it took longer, we felt safer when we got home. Ever since that day, we haven't left the house and have kept the blinds closed. I have no idea what to do. Both of us are scared, and I don't want to scare my grandmother by telling her. Both of us recognize that they only followed me, and that they didn't pay attention to my sister. I still have 3 more weeks until my parents come back to the country, and my sister is freaking out. We're both sure that they're waiting to abduct me. This happened about 10 years ago, but I will never forget it. At the time, I was around 12 years old. I am a female and was a competitive softball player, and my team was nationally ranked, so we travelled all over the United States to play. The result? Long car rides, sometimes through the night. One night in particular, it was about midnight, and we were on our way to a tournament in who knows where. I'd been sleeping in the car, when we stopped at a gas station for a bathroom break. My teammate, who was also around 10, and myself, decided to stay in the car, while our mums went to look inside because we really didn't have to go. A few moments after, the mothers had left, locking us in the car. I noticed another car in the parking lot. It was a few spaces over, and was the only other car in the station at the time. I noticed a middle-aged man with a little girl, who was about 6 to 8 years old, who I assumed was his daughter, because she looked strikingly similar. I met eyes with the daughter in the car, and she smiled at me, and I smiled back and waved because she was adorable. The little girl then said something to the man, and he looked and smiled too. I went back to minding my own business, as the man went into the store and left his daughter in the car. When I looked back at the little girl, she was looking back at me with a scared look on her face. She started hitting the windows and motioning for me to come over to the car. Instantly, my adrenaline went into overdrive. This girl was acting really creepy, as if she needed my help. My mind was racing. What if this man had kidnapped her, and she just needed my help? My initial thought was that it was her father, but you never know. I just had no idea what to do. I turned to my friend who had gone back to sleep, and tried to wake her, but she just shot me a dirty look and went back to sleep. Turning back to the girl, I was about to get out of the car to go talk to her, when I saw that she had made eye contact with the man in the store, who was just standing there watching through the window. He smiled at her and nodded, seemingly approving. She smiled back and then turned to me, and instantly went back to trying to get me to come over to the car. After seeing the exchange, I thought something was off. It seemed this girl was acting at the direction of the man. I then decided I would not get out of the car, and I would just tell my mum about it instead when she arrived. Because hey, I was aware that I was a little girl myself, and what the heck could I do? Next thing I know, the man is returning to the car. He hadn't bought anything, and had basically been standing in the window watching the whole time. When he got into the car, they started having a conversation, occasionally glancing at me. Eventually, the little girl shrugged, and he kind of patted her on the shoulder. They started to pull out of the parking lot, and I glanced at the little girl one last time, and saw she was looking right back at me with a huge smile. I was so creeped out, but didn't tell my mum when she returned to the car, because I was still so confused and shocked about what had just happened. For a little bit, I didn't tell anyone because I felt bad that I hadn't done anything, when that girl could have actually been in trouble. But thinking back after I'd gotten over the initial shock, I concluded that the man was using his daughter to try and lure me over to the car by making me believe she was in some type of trouble. Who knows what would have happened next, but my guess is he would have run out from his watching spot and put me in the car with him and driven off. The creepiest thing is that it seemed so orchestrated. I was sure this was not the first time they'd done this. In the spring of 2005, I was driving from Maryland to Florida for a major conference. I'd left my friend's house in Richmond in the wee hours of the morning, and had stopped around 5 a.m. in Northern Carolina to fill one tank and empty another. I'd just gotten back in the car and turned it on, where there was a knock on the passenger side window. Outside was an older woman in her 50s. I locked the doors and cracked the windows just enough to hear her tell me that she needed a ride just a few exits back up I-95. I kept repeating that I wasn't heading that way, and she wasn't letting go. and every hair on my neck started to stand up. I thought about going back to the store, but to be honest, I wasn't sure if I would make it to the store, or what situation I would find myself if I did. Finally, I held my cell phone up and said that if she didn't leave me alone, I was calling the police. The situation changed completely, and she apologized and walked away. I was shaking too much to drive, so it took a few minutes to collect myself before pulling out and going back onto the highway. That's when I saw a car pulling out from behind the store. The lights hit in just the right way, and I was shocked to see that it was her behind the wheel. I recovered really quickly and pulled out the station behind her. She made her way back to 95, and I was right behind. That's how I saw her pull a car she supposedly didn't have onto the 95S, the exact opposite direction of where she desperately wanted to go. I got around her, and as I passed her car, she locked eyes with me, with a stare that was so incredibly cold, I have chills this day just thinking about it. Since then, no matter what I'm doing or where I am, I never get in the car without locking the doors as a first priority. I also never, not ever, crack the windows for anyone but a cop. Anyone who approaches my car gets yelled at through the window with my hands on the wheel in case a quick getaway is needed. This is a story about something that happened to my grandmother when she was the young wife of the mayor of Miami Shores, most likely in the late 40s or early 50s. And in order to truly appreciate this story, you need to know one thing about my grandmother. She was raised to be a perfect Southern belle. She always knew the appropriate thing to say, always used perfect grammar, and for the better portion of her life, conducted herself with demure charm. However, I do have a distinct memory of her telling me that her favorite word was bullshit. So when I was 10, she must have not been as meek as she once said she was. This story is going to be short, having heard it from my father and not my grandmother herself. My grandmother, as the story goes, was driving along Miami Expressway and took an exit ramp in North Miami. At the bottom of the ramp there was a stop sign, and my grandmother pulled to a stop. There was a man standing on the corner, and when she stopped, he grabbed the passenger side door of her car, opened it, and jumped into the vehicle. My grandmother was not naive and knew here what was going on: kidnapping, and possibly worse. All of this occurred before the invention of seatbelts, so when my unassuming grandmother stepped on the gas, and I mean she floored it, and turned a hard left, the man was flung back out the passenger side door and onto the road. My grandmother didn't look back and sped home. My grandmother is no longer alive, and though she was raised to be seen and not heard, she was the most badass woman I've ever known. She's been through so many crazy things in her life that I was not even surprised to hear about this 5 years after her death. Her husband, my grandfather, also had some action movie-worthy experiences, but none, I think, can trump what happened to her. When I was 7, I was camping with my parents and baby sister in Virginia. We were staying in a campground specifically for recreational vehicles, but there were also some cabins available to rent. On the first day there, after being constantly pestered to take me to the park, my dad complained to my mum that I was old enough to walk the short distance to the park and play without supervision. My mum had always been a very overprotective person and a worrier, and even more so after this camping trip. My mum finally gave in and allowed me to go alone to the campground park. While at the playground, I met a little girl around my own age, and we played together for a while. She too was by herself, and I invited her to come back to my RV to play with Barbies, and we headed in that direction. On the way, we crossed paths with my parents, who were going to another family's RV to visit and socialize. We let them know that we were going to play Barbies in my family's RV. And after that, we played for a while, and she suggested we pack up the Barbies and go to the cabin that she and her grandparents were staying in to play with her Barbies too, which we did. It never even occurred to me that my parents didn't know this girl or her family, or where I would have gone, and they assumed that we were just staying in the RV to play. We played at her cabin for a long time, and while we played, her grandparents were packing up all their things and preparing to leave the campground. When they were all packed up to go, they said they would drop me back off at the RV on their way, so I wouldn't have to walk. Obviously, my parents had always told me to never get into a car with a stranger, and I knew this, but it just never occurred to me exactly what this meant. I genuinely never felt remotely afraid or concerned about the situation. The little girl's grandparents packed up the car, and we all climbed in. We stopped at the campground's general store, and her grandpa bought us both ice cream cones, and I could think how nice and generous her family was. We got back in the car, and I assumed they would be dropping me off next to my RV. I sat in the car eating my ice cream and talking with my friend, completely oblivious to the outside of the car, when suddenly my door flew open and my dad, with tears pouring down his cheeks, yanked me out of the car and hugged me harder than he ever had in his life. I was so confused, and then the car I was in sped away. It was then I realized that we were at the exit of the campground. Apparently, upon returning to the RV and finding my new friend and me gone without a trace, my parents had contacted the ranger station, and a lot of people were out looking for me, in the woods and going around door to doors of the other RVs. My dad had just happened to be walking by as he saw me in the people's car just about to leave the campground. I don't know who these people were, but they definitely had no intention of bringing me back to my parents. I think the ice cream was bought to distract me from noticing we weren't heading in the direction of my own campsite. Over the years, I often think of that day and how different my life would be if my dad hadn't have seen me in the nick of time. That is, of course, if I was still alive to tell this tale, as this could have gone a whole lot worse. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you did enjoy tonight's episode. My good friend Briefcase has uploaded a very scary video today about a Frenchwoman who committed some horrific crimes, which are sure to pique your interest. I'll leave a link in the description and at the end of the video if you'd like to see it, and believe me, you're going to want to. But anyway, if you have a story that you wish to submit, be sure to send it to my email or to my Reddit. And if you liked the video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment with your thoughts on tonight's video. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.